All right, let's do it, y'all. So today's talk is on mainly bags. We'll do a little review of some of the things we talked about at the first meeting. If you're not a part of our text line, which I think all of you are, yep, all of you guys are. So the text line's been great. I love being able to send out little reminders. Anybody got any feedback on frequency? I try not to do things every day. I try to do some motivational something here and there. Like, is it okay? Is it too much? Anybody got any comments on it?
I think you got the healthy amount going on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm very, very aware of like some people might be like, oh my gosh. And I try not to, I don't think anything in it is salesy. I'm subscribed to some guys' text numbers and I get tired of getting their stuff. But all right, so remember why we are putting the effort into all of this. We say it all the time. It's always worth reiterating. It's because we want to be happy. We want to live this amazing life. And we know that health is just one of the keys to happiness. So I'm excited that we're focusing on what we are now calling self-reliance, which is this combination of the health and the readiness and the wealth piece all together. And obviously, I'm not an expert in everything. I'm slowly getting to be, I feel like, a relative super knowledgeable person in a lot of these areas. But my vision in the future is to have other experts come in and give us info that we might not otherwise be able to have access to. So I want to say thank you for being a paying member. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing. I'm living a dream, being able to focus on my personal health and self-reliance and then share that with other people. I just couldn't be happier, honestly. And you guys are what helps make that happen. So thank you so much. So my vision for everything that we communicate, everything that we teach is to give you a shortcut to what it is that we're talking about. So you don't have to go through all the books and you don't have to go through all the blogs and forums and years of buying stuff and throwing stuff away. And if you decide to on your own, that's great. And then maybe you'll have some information to share with us. But my goal, just like with health and everything else, is to give you a shortcut to what it is that we're trying to learn together. And I brought this up in the first preparedness talk. I just want to reiterate that I do believe in humanity. I believe in the potential of a lot of great positive things. So sometimes when we get into the preparedness information, it sounds kind of doom and gloom, or it can be. Fred and I were talking about this the other day in the parking lot. Sometimes people get into this and all of a sudden their awareness shifts and they're now looking for all these bad and problematic things. And I find myself sometimes too, because I listen to a lot of thought leaders and with the current world situation. But I'm really thankful for the book club that we're in right now, with Zen and the Art of Happiness, because it just reiterates and reminds me that no matter what the situation is, it's almost as if it is what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't strive to change things to the best of your abilities and within your circle of influence, but to a large degree, things are as they are. And what we want to do is learn to thrive within the context of these different situations, whatever they may be. Okay. So I call this using what's wrong to focus on what's right. So what's great about the preparedness information in general, but also the current world situation is, if we look at it positively, we can say, well, this is giving us some nudges and reminders to focus on some things that otherwise we might not make a priority. I think back to the 1980s and 90s, and it felt different. It felt very patriotic, everything was always growing. There's a lot of certainty and security, or it felt like it. And things are very different now. And maybe a good thing about that is that we can't be so naive to think that was going to last forever. So I'm thankful for where we're at. I'm thankful for this freaking book club. I loved it. I read this book like I think 6 or 7 times, but now that I was focused on putting a summary of each chapter and then reading everybody else's summaries, like it just reiterated and reinforced a lot of things that I feel like are very, very important. So with health, a little preparedness, and the support of each other, we can learn to live and thrive within any context. Where do I get my info? Again, I've read, I don't know, like 6 or 7 different preparedness books, some very doom and gloom and some aren't. My favorite's been Prosper, one of my favorites. I am a part of a couple of forums now, and those are great too. I pulled a lot of, just updating this bags list, I pulled a lot of info from those forums and just asking some guys some questions. I've got several people that are first responders, EMTs, search and rescue people. So, and then FEMA was actually really great. Sometimes government organizations, when it comes to health, I mean, obviously, I think we all kind of agree and feel the same way, but the FEMA and the ready.gov stuff is really, really solid. So again, this presentation, this talk is designed to give you a shortcut to the things that I feel like you need to know. I also feel like one of my strengths in health and what we're talking about today is I have this intuition to be able to take in a lot of information and boil it down to what it is that we need to know. Because there's a lot of things, a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of stuff you can buy, a lot of different ways of doing it, but it's like, what is the most essential stuff? Okay. So from an overall preparedness outline perspective, I would say, these are the things that we want to cover eventually. So we're pretty much covering most of it up to this point. Health and wealth in order, meaning your personal health and your personal wealth in order, your finances. We talked last time about prepping your home for 2 weeks of resilience, meaning that you could shelter in place and you got what you need. You're not dependent to a large degree on anything external. Critical documents, emergency communication plan. Today we're talking about bags, and then all the while we're cultivating community and self-reliance with other things. I'm hoping to get a garden started at my place, and I'm hoping to share that experience with everybody. I'm thinking it's going to be great. I can't wait to learn from it. That's what we would mean by community and self-reliance stuff. So, and then Chandler, and I'm not sure if we've mentioned this to anybody else. Fred and I have put together a pretty solid outline for the mutual assistance group, which we're trying to find another name for it. I feel like that's really solid too. So let's just reiterate our initial priorities. Family communication plan. I have a PDF. I have a fillable PDF and just a regular PDF of a format for this. And I think that this is very simple and very practical. And it's very useful once you put your family communication plan together to practice it in some ways. I've actually notified most of the people on there that, hey, you're part of my emergency communication plan. So I just want to make sure your cell phone works and I can text messages to you. This is from FEMA. If you're using a mobile device, a text message may get through when a phone cannot. So text messages, may be a better way to communicate with people if something crazy happens. With the emergency communication plan, we recommend having a paper copy. And then we recommend also probably having it on a USB drive or multiple USB drives. I've got one that's locked with a code on it, and I have that in my everyday carry, my backpack. And then I have just a regular USB drive in our little WTFU bag at home. Okay. And then you can share it with people that are important to you. Make sure that you have it in what you would consider to be important places. I don't consider this to be as, private information as something like maybe the critical documents thing. So I don't have a problem having a copy of this in multiple places. The other piece, we'll talk about whether you actually want to carry that in some places that are on you, because if it gets stolen, that could be a problem. And then also practice it, like I mentioned before. It's really useful once you put this plan together to communicate with the people that are on it, make sure the numbers work, and make sure they understand that, hey, if something happens, like I'd like to be able to call on you if I need to. I feel like everyone in our group, I'm actually wanting to put together a contact list. I was going to do a poll inside the group to see if that would be useful. If people wanted to share like their phone number and their email, I think that might be useful. So emergency communication plan, super standard, super simple, and super powerful. In addition to like important phone numbers, you've got numbers of police, poison control, different insurance places that you have insurance with, your veterinarian. So I feel like this is a really, really useful document. Any questions on emergency communication plan? All right, if you got something, feel free to unmute yourself. So again, just to review, safeguarding critical documents. I feel like this handout is super solid as well, super practical. These are things that, you just need to make sure you have it in one place. I'm sure all of us have these things scattered all over the place. Most people have them somewhere. And you know what it's like when you go to find a birth certificate and you can't find it. And then you order one and you go through that process. Then you find the one that you were looking for at some point. And we could apply that to probably a lot of these different things. Social Security card. So I think it's really useful to have these things together and then to make copies and have those copies in one place. So again, this is a PDF you can download in the group. And what was that? In the first preparedness talk, we'll also have a PDF of it attached to this talk as well. So yeah, I'm not going to go through each one of these bullets because we talked about this before, but just super important information that I think is useful to have all together, and then also maybe have another copy that you can have in your WTFU bag. Okay. Cool. All right. Any questions, comments on that? So, by the way, when you're storing this stuff, I would highly recommend, we do have a little mini file cabinet, but we also have a fireproof bag with our secondary copies in it, so that if something happened, house caught on fire. By the way, my freeze dryer blew up the other day. It didn't explode, but like we woke up in the morning and I smelled like burning, and went in there, and I guess the pressure had gotten so high that the front shield of it cracked or something. The first thing I thought about was, I'm so thankful that, number one, like I woke up, just in case something else would happen. But number two, we got dogs that probably would have alerted us. And then number three, we got our little freaking fireproof bag with all of our stuff in it. And in case something like that did happen, like we'd have things that we need to start over. So highly recommend that you put communication plan, critical documents on a USB drive, maybe multiple USB drives, and then also at least one copy in a fireproof bag. And I will share the links to the fireproof bags that I have, but there's a bunch of them. You can just Google or Amazon it. So, and then finally, as part of our initial prerequisites, getting your home ready for 2 weeks of self-reliance. I'm not going to go through every single one of these things. There's a lot of situations this could be useful in, including the worst case scenarios. So this was in the previous talk. So again, I don't want to spend up too much time going through this today, but 2 weeks of self-reliance, I think is very, very important. And that means basically having 2 weeks of water, 2 weeks of food, and a bunch of other things that would make you relatively self-reliant, not dependent on anything else, anyone else. And you could take care of yourself if you had to for those 2 weeks in home. So now getting into the bag piece of it. So we've got several bags that we're talking about here today. The WTFU bag we mentioned before, which is basically you wake up and you got something you can grab and get out of the house if there's an emergency. And you can start over if you have to. You have all your identification and important information in there. I'm thinking probably the most practical situation that would happen is if your house is on fire. And it's so small that you can actually grab it, and then you still have this priority of getting your family and your dogs or whatever else is in there out, okay? So it's not something that's super complicated. Then we have our EDC, which is our everyday carry. We have our get home bag, and then we have our bug out bag. And these are all different sizes. Last year when we did this talk, or when it was a couple of years ago, I had a duffel bag that I was using. And so I've converted over to a GoRuck. I think it's a 45-liter bag. And I do think it's important for most of these, except for the one that's in your vehicle, to be a backpack type thing or something that you can wear, because honestly, you really can't depend on your vehicle. It could be a situation where you can't drive your vehicle for some reason. So in the handouts that we have, these have all been updated. We have a list of the bags, their purposes, their time durations as the first page. And then we have, for simplification, so this is something that I did, just kind of gleaning info from these different forums that I'm in and what I've read. I feel like there's major categories that we can consolidate everything into. And when you start to look at it like this, because preparedness and getting these bags together can be very overwhelming. And I like to think of it almost like a backpacking situation. I'm trying to keep things as light as possible and also focus on the most crucial, critical things. And so that's why I put these little categories together, because I feel like if you can get your mind set and thinking in terms of these different categories, what would I need in these different categories to survive for 3 days plus, I think that makes it a little bit easier for our minds to digest it, because otherwise, like I said, you can go down these rabbit holes and you can just get all kinds of crazy things. And you have to think in terms of like, I have to carry this, and each individual person should have their own versions of these things and be able to carry their own bags. So WTFU bag is basically, if you had just a few minutes to get out of your home, what would you need to start your life over? And most people, like we mentioned before, they probably have these things scattered throughout the house in different places, but I think it's so useful. It feels so, I guess, secure to know that I have these things all in one place. Arnica has her things all in one place. I'm not worried about like losing that information. And it's actually very handy, if we need it for something. Arnica just got her last name changed, and she needed some different documents for that. So ideally, this is something that's going to be next to your bed, close to your bed, or maybe by the front door. I think that would be acceptable as well. You can just grab it and go. I think it could be or should be small enough that you can add it to your EDC, everyday carry, right? So it's something, if I'm, and by the way, I keep my EDC right by my bed now because it has my handgun in it. And for whatever reason, I just feel safe with everything in one place. So if we had to get up and get out really quick, I could grab our little bag, fireproof bag. It's tucked up under one of our mattresses. The corner is sticking out. And then I can take that, throw it in my EDC, throw it in my backpack, and then do whatever else I have to do in the home. So if we look at the handout here, we got a summary on the purpose of this WTFU bag. And then we got bag types. I think a fanny pack or one of these fireproof bags is the best thing. So I love fanny packs. I used to be so resistant to them until I used it on some backpacking trips. I'm like, man, this thing is so awesome. If you use a fanny pack, obviously, and you have some paper copies, you're folding those things up. If you've got one of these fireproof bags, they usually come in a little bit bigger, not as big as a legal size, but definitely big enough to hold 8x5, 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. So I think that that's ideal. If anybody has any other suggestions, I'm totally open to it. And again, this is ideally something that you can grab and just throw into your EDC. This is the fanny pack I have from Hyperlite, and then this is the fireproof bag that I have. If you have an EDC bag, it may contain some items. Let's just go through the things that we probably want to have access to. I do have an extra set of Jeep keys and an extra set of house keys in our little WTFU bag. We have a USB drive, critical documents, printed documents, emergency communication plan that is also on the drive and also printed. And then we have a phone. So we don't have a backup burner phone. And then maybe some miscellaneous things that you feel like would be extremely important to you. Some things that you should have in your EDC bag, which we'll talk about here in a second. But if you don't, it can be in this little bag, maybe like a little mini. Actually, we do have a nano flashlight inside this little bag. Any important medications. Again, this could be a part of your EDC. Prescription glasses, some cash. We do have a little bit of cash in this bag. And then I'm hoping to have cash most of the time in my EDC in my backpack, depending if I've used it or not. And then cell phone, most of us are going to have on us. I am going to get a burner phone at some point, which is one of those disposable phones that you can use for a temporary period of time. And then also super useful. I do have this in my backpack, but if you don't, you can have it here, which would be a backup battery with a USB charging cable. Next, let's get into our everyday carry. For everyday carry, we're looking at bag size, probably 15 to 25 liters if you had to go and try some on. And I'd highly recommend just going to like REI or Sportsman Warehouse or Bass Pro Shops or something and just finding something that feels comfortable to you. Everyday carry means you're carrying this on you all day, every day. Okay. And it's got some essential things in it. I did have some questions from a couple of clients, females, like they don't want to wear a backpack. So we got a couple suggestions and recommendations. If you're not familiar with it, we have the 10 essentials. This is a checklist that we use usually for like a day hiking checklist, but I also think it's very useful to keep most of this stuff in your everyday carry anyway. So this is a really, really good place to start. And it's things that you want to have close to your person almost all the time. So again, you could think maybe the WTFU items plus the 10 essentials, plus some personal modifications. So in the handouts, we've got the EDC section here. And so let's just go through that. Ideally, it's a backpack or a sling pack. Purses are not recommended. Does anybody know why we would not recommend a purse to carry your everyday carry stuff in?
Perhaps because it's a target for theft.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's easy to grab. So if you have something that's like a shoulder bag, a sling pack, or a backpack, that's much harder to get a hold of. Okay. And I have so much stuff in my backpack here. Like I would just hate for that thing to get stolen. Right. So it's not recommended to use a purse for it. So yeah, if you're shopping for an ideal size, if you got to put the stuff that's included in the 10 essentials in there, then you're probably looking at about 15 liters to 25 liters. When you see that in a store like REI or something, you're talking about like a JanSport backpack, but there are some nice, if you go on Amazon and just search like a female sling pack or female backpack, and you type in the liter size, then you'll pull up a lot of nice and I guess pretty looking things, for lack of a better way of saying it. So 10 essentials. Let's just breeze through this. If we can relate this to the categories that I shared earlier. So that's why I think these categories are really useful. Okay, remember we talked about these in the very beginning. So I try to go through each one of these packs, stick into those categories. So in this everyday carry, water, you're looking at about 32 to 64 ounces. I'm always carrying my 40-ounce Bigfoot. If you've got like a 20-ounce thing, I think that's great. Something that's just with you most of the time. Real food, about 12 hours worth of real food, or maybe like a meal or a half a meal. You're talking about like some beef jerky, a few Epic meat bars. You could do some honey, some freeze-dried meals, some freeze-dried snacks or something like that. Fire, at a minimum, I'd recommend having a lighter or two. You could do some stormproof matches. That's an upgrade. Ferro rod and striker, that's an upgrade. I have that in my pack, but definitely not necessary. I think a lighter or two would be perfectly fine. shelter, emergency blanket, or bivy blanket. And they're like those space blankets, they fold up, they're super, super light. And so those can be useful. I've got an emergency bivy, which also is very, very small, but it's actually super, super functional. So that's like an emergency shelter situation. Clothing, it just depends on the weather. In the summer, I always have a long sleeve shirt in there just in case to cover up. But depending on the weather, you may want to throw in a rain jacket some days. You may need some gloves. You may need a beanie. In the winter, I almost always have my beanie in my bag if I don't have it on my head. So that's going to be a weather dependent situation. For light, at a minimum, I'd say a headlamp with some extra batteries. When you store your headlamp, a pro tip would be to take the batteries out and then put those in I actually use a little doggy poop bag, so that the batteries don't drain and they also don't have that little acidification thing happen. So I think a headlamp is going to be the most practical thing for most people. You can also do like a little mini flashlight or nano light or something like that. For communication, most of us are going to have our smartphone on us. I do think it's useful to have a signal mirror because it's so light and small. I'll put some links into some ones that we recommend, and then an emergency whistle. And I'm a big fan of having some signaling tape. We went through a survival class, I don't know if it was last year, a couple of years ago. And I think that's one of the most practical things that you can have is like this little pile or roll of the signal tape. And that's the stuff that you see on trails or hunting trails, or really bright colored, really lightweight tape. Never know when that would come in handy. A backup power supply would be really useful. So like a power bank, and those are things that are like about this big, and they just hold a pretty decent charge that you can definitely charge your cell phone a few times with. I use it on backpacking trips with a little charging cable. For navigation, compass and maps, compasses are only going to be useful if you have a map to go along with it. I mean, a compass could be useful from a direction standpoint if you know that a road is this way or a river is this way. But in general, a compass isn't going to be super useful unless you have a map to go with it. So a map would go up to maybe 150, 200 miles driving distance outside of where you are. Ideally, it's topographical, meaning that you can see the different terrain features, so that if you had to go off roads, if you were doing some hiking or something like that, that you'd be able to navigate using that. REI has a great compass class, and if anyone's interested in that, I'm going to post. I'm not going to make an event out of it, but I am going to post the dates that they actually have those things going on. I think it's a very nominal fee, and they take you out. I think they take you up to Mount Charleston, and they show you how to do all the different azimuths and triangulations and stuff. It's really, really cool. And then I have the benefit of getting to practice that when I go out backpacking with Lombard and Arnica's family and Lee Wilson. So super useful. Tools, at a minimum, I think most people, including women, should have some kind of a knife, like a little folding knife, pocket knife. Got some recommendations for those for sure. A bonus and upgrade would be a multi-tool, like a Leatherman. There's a specific Leatherman that we'll recommend that is just proven to be like super, super tough and useful. Also, there's a Swiss Army knife, the genuine Swiss Army knives. There's a version that's very lightweight and small, might be a little bit better for some women. Hope I'm not being too stereotypical with that, but and then I have some 550 cord, which is the paracord, and then some duct tape rolled onto a little like a old chapstick container. So I think those would be upgrades. At a minimum, having a knife and or a multi-tool would be super useful. Medical hygiene type stuff, a small first aid kit would be awesome. Any medications that are pertinent to you, but obviously you're going to be carrying those with you anyway. Some handy wipes I think are super, super useful. Those have come in handy for me. Emergency communication plan inside your EDC. Backup drive with critical documents is optional, because I do understand, and this is one of those gray areas that a lot of people don't have a consensus on. It's just a personal preference thing. I do understand if you get this thing stolen, like that's a lot of things that someone gets away with, which is why you definitely want to have something that's on your person or on when you're moving. It's on your back, and if you're somewhere, then it's like right there and you're touching it and you can see it. Okay. Backup printed documents, same thing. That's just a personal preference deal. Money, obviously you're going to have your wallet or your version of a wallet with some cash in it most days. House and car keys, obviously you're carrying those with you to get around. Self-defense, well, you've already got your knife, so you can use that as self-defense. Maybe having some pepper spray or a handgun if you have a CCW. And then if it's applicable, old prescription glasses, some sun protection would be really, really useful. I think for most people that know that they need it, some sunscreen as a backup. And then, like I said, in the summer, I'm always carrying a long sleeve shirt. In the winter, I mean, it just depends on like, I do think about this most days when I get up. I have a little mesh bag and I'm putting my clothes in it and I'm thinking, what do I need for the day? Summer, I always have a long sleeve shirt in case I need to protect myself from sun exposure. In the winter, I'm usually kind of wearing a lot of that anyway, but I'll usually have like a beanie or something like that. I always have a bandana in there. I think those are super useful in situations where you forgot a hat or forgot a beanie or something like that. So we will move into the get home bag. I would say this is probably your last priority, like a bonus thing to put together. But the get home bag is basically just imagine being stranded away from home and you need to kind of be able to take care of yourself for a day, like a 24-hour deal. Okay. I have one of these, like a little rolled up duffel bag underneath my Jeep. By the way, if anybody ever gets in any trouble, I got this in my Jeep under the back seat. And it's, just in case I need some assistance staying away from home for 24 hours. Okay. So it can be a backpack or it could be a duffel bag because you're not carrying this around with you. This is something designed to stay in your vehicle, or you could even maybe keep it at the office or the place that you're at most of the time during the day that's away from home. Estimated about 25 to 35 liters for the things that we're going to talk about here. So some of these things may be duplicated in your WTFU bag or EDC bag, but this just, I guess, a personal preference thing. Just cross-check it with what you plan on carrying with you and what you feel like would be most important. But I would say definitely some extra water in addition to the water that you carry around in your EDC. An extra food, maybe think about a day's worth. So instead of having a few snacks in your EDC and your get home bag, you've got like a day's worth of jerky or freeze dried meals or something like that. Shelter and weather protection. So tarp is super, super versatile. And by the way, there's another thing, right, Chris? You get a tarp and you have no idea how to freaking use it. That would be a good little freaking mini booklet. Tarp is super versatile, super useful. And then maybe a poncho, maybe a portable tent if you want to go that far. I did not. Blanket and pillow. I got a mini blow-up pillow that's a backpack and pillow, an old one that I don't use anymore. And you can also use like a jacket for a pillow. But a blanket, I've got my emergency bivvy, and then I do have one of the Army poncho liners rolled up under my backseat. So, and true story, this came in handy. I'm pretty sure this was before I met Arnica. I was driving to El Paso, and I took this weird route. I think it was through Silver City or something like that, because my dad said the sights were beautiful. And it was just I think it was around the Christmas holidays, and it was just really, really cold. And I ended up, I don't know if I was lost or what, but I ended up on this freaking mountain going through like just all these different like switchbacks, and just like I wasn't sure if I was in the right area. Cell phone wasn't connecting with anything, so I wasn't sure with my maps. And I pulled off to the side of the road to take a piss. I hadn't seen a car forever, and my Jeep wouldn't start. So, and I sat there for a little bit, and then I had all this stuff underneath my back seat, and I got in the back seat with Conan, and we kind of sat there together. I put on my hazard lights, and we bundled up, and it was a solid probably like 5 or 6 hours before somebody came by and was able to jump me. So and my dad had taught me that a while back. He's like, always travel with these things just in case. You never know. You just go off the road, you get stranded somewhere, you'll be thankful you had this stuff. Then I went through this kind of information, kind of confirmed it, and I was really thankful that I had it. So that's a practical use application there. Let's see, extra change of clothes. So I have an old pair of beat up pants in there. I have an old pair of beat up shoes. So maybe it's just an extra change. Again, if you're away for 24 hours, if you needed to change and get into something a little bit cleaner. And then hygiene, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, wipes, razor. And then your emergency communication, maybe a little NOAA radio. Not sure if you'd want to have that in there just for 24 hours, might be useful. Ham radio is an advanced radio you have to get a license for. That's one of my next little projects. Probably wouldn't want to keep that in there. So I'm going to take that off the list, actually, because that's an expensive item. And then items that you probably have in your EDC, but if not, you might want to include them in there: navigation, compass, and maps, tools, but you're probably carrying this on you anyway. Medical hygiene, again, maybe a first aid kit, but if you're carrying that with you, that's personal preference if you want to have an extra one in there. And then extra glasses and prescriptions and things like that. Bug out bag. This is going to be something that's a little bit bigger. So I mentioned before, we used to be okay with duffel bags. I think the goal should be to get to where you have a decent size backpack that you can throw this on your back. It's an investment. I guess depending on the brand, you're looking at probably like $100 plus, but totally worth it because you really can't depend on vehicles. And we can't predict whatever those situations are going to be. So it's going to be useful to have something you can throw on your back. So the ultimate goal should get to get to where you can have a bug out bag that's a backpack. I think most people on average would benefit from, when we consider the things that we're going to talk about putting in here, about 40 to 55 liters. I can make some recommendations. My favorite backpacks are the Go Rucks, super expensive. I think the best thing that we can do, again, is to go to some place like REI, Sportsman's Warehouse, Bass Pro Shops, and just go try some things on and see what feels comfortable and what we like. So some tips here. And again, this is just kind of gleaning from a lot of different resources, the book Prosper. Try not to carry too much weight. Think in terms of backpacking, bare essentials, which is why I like that whole categories way of looking at things. Resist putting extra type stuff in there. So you're looking for things that you basically need to survive for a few days. Be as generally prepared as possible versus trying to predict specific situations or scenarios. Pre-made kits, you'll see a lot of these things pop up, especially if you start visiting like preparedness sites and things. You'll see a lot of preparedness stuff pop up in your Instagram. Sometimes you'll get some emails and you can search for things, and there's a lot of pre-made things. They're not the best quality. Almost all the experts would agree that your own personal homemade, even med kits, are going to be way better than some of these other, because they're trying to hit a certain price point, and so they're skimping on the quality of some of the items in it. So pre-made kits are probably not the way to go. Your kit at a base level is going to be probably about $200, maybe a little bit more. And what I'm going to cover today is a base kit, but then we'll also talk about like some upgrades that you can add to it. Don't spread gear across bags. So each person needs to have their own bag. We're in the process of working on both of our bags. And I'm trying to experiment with myself and my personal bag before I make Arnica buy into all this stuff. But everyone needs to have their own bag because this is based on 3 days of survival for an individual. Now, when it comes to kids, I think the recommendation, if a child is 10 years or older, they should be able to carry their own stuff for 3 days, while the parents can carry maybe some of the heavier things that the whole family might use to some degree. If it's a smaller child, maybe thinking about having some things in their bag that are like, if the child gets lost, someone knows how to contact you, or maybe some things that are comforting for the child or something like that. Super useful to compartmentalize your bag with either little Ziploc bags or some weatherproof bags or something along those lines. It just makes it easier to organize it. You can also make the weight distribute properly. So when you're backpacking, you want your backpack to be set up in a way that most of the heavy stuff is towards your body, so that you have that center of weight closer, or center of gravity closer to you. And then you have the lighter things on the bottom and filling out on the outsides and the top. So the compartmentalization of the different items makes it easier for you to move things around and get to something that feels really comfortable when it's on your back. And then phone and shoes don't have to be in there, but we'll have them listed there because you're probably going to have shoes on you, and you're probably going to have your phone on you most of the time. And you definitely don't want to double dip gear, meaning having some gear that is supposed to be in your bug out bag, but you also want to use it for camping. So we have a separate stove for both. So you don't want a situation where if you had to get out and you didn't have much time to do it, now you're running over to some different boxes and different places that you have other equipment and gear and trying to pull the things out that should be in your bug out bag. So it's highly recommended that you don't do the double dipping thing. All right. And then, most of the stuff is covered in our category thing here. So again, if we look at our handouts, and then we look at these categories, the categories are going to match up with the different things that we talk about here. Okay. So for a bag, again, 40 to 55 liters as you go out and you seek your own backpack. And let's just start at the top and work our way down. So for water, you're looking for 32 ounces up to 64 ounces. That's not 3 days worth of water, but water is super heavy. So you want enough to get you through a day or so. And then you also want to carry some kind of filtration. Some people have asked about like purification. You got purification tablets and different ways of purifying water, but a lot of times, most of them that I've seen, and I have some that I carry in my EDC, some drop type things, they usually take some time to take effect, right? I think the ones I have in there is like a combo drops and it takes 4 hours. So ideally you want something that's filtration based, like one of the life straws or something. I do have a life straw in my backpack too. And there's plenty of different options out there that are super lightweight that you can include in this. So just imagine, you're out for 3 days, maybe you're on foot. You don't want to carry 3 days worth of water. You don't want to carry like 2 or 3 gallons worth of water because it's just so heavy. But if you have enough to get you by for a little bit, you're going to come across some water at some point, hopefully, theoretically, and you can use your little filtration system. For food, obviously you're looking for non-perishable, shelf-stable. I would say focus on nutrient density and caloric density. Okay, so nutrient density and caloric density would be a lot of the animal food type stuff, starchy things like plantain chips. You could also do like some honey, some fat, like some ghee or tallow. I would say in this situation, you're focusing on survival and not taste and comfort. And unfortunately, coffee is probably not a priority. I don't know, maybe some freeze-dried coffee, but probably not a priority. I think freeze-dried meals are freaking the best thing to go with, and shameless plug for our freeze-dried meals because we make them, they're freaking great. For cooking and eating, a stove, super useful. It can be a gas stove or it could be what is known as a hobo stove. So I'll share a link to it when I finish putting this together. I have one that's called a firebox, and it's really awesome. It's about this big, and it's got this system where you can just feed wood and twigs and kindling and things like that into the bottom of it. And it concentrates the heat up into this flame so that you can cook on it. And you also have the ability to kind of redirect fire for heat if you need to. So I think it's super practical because anywhere you go, you'll be able to find like some dead kindling, some dead branches and things. So that might be something to consider. I don't know that you want to have both of them because it'll take up a pretty significant amount of weight. I think the drawback with the gas stoves is that you have to have fuel. Fuel's kind of lightweight. So it's like either do the gas stove with some fuel or you do like one of these little fireboxes or hobo stoves. Or if you've got like a family situation, even though everyone's having their own pack, maybe one person has a stove and then a gas stove, and then one person has the hobo stove. And then utensils, I think all you need is a spork, honestly. A spork. If you don't know what a spork is, a spoon and a fork together. Okay. I love sporks. Optional pot for boiling stuff. But honestly, like our freeze-dried meals, our epic meat bars, plantain chips, they don't need to be cooked. I feel like that's kind of a luxury, but if you wanted to use a pot, you can put a really lightweight titanium pot or something like that in there. We'll have a couple of recommendations for it. For fire, a couple of lighters, no brainer. Stormproof matches, I also think is a no brainer. Don't have to carry it in the EDC. In your bug out bag, I think it would be really useful. These stormproof matches they're awesome. Like you can stick them in water as they're on fire and they don't go out. So, and then a ferro rod and striker. This is where you're doing the flint into some something that catches fire really easy. So we do have that too. But I would say that's an upgrade or a bonus. For shelter and sleeping, clothing layers, meaning like layers like long johns, long sleeve, long pants underneath, that would go underneath some pants and a jacket and a shell and maybe a rain jacket. And then tarp with cordage and knife. So again, we see the tarp here. Cordage would be like the 550 cord. I do want to have an extra knife inside this bag versus the ones you carry on your EDC. And you need the tarp and or you need the cordage to the knife so that you can string the tarp up and put some tension on it. So I think I'm thankful that Chris brought that up because I think having some little cheat sheets, maybe they have some pre-made booklets, and if they don't, we can put one together on how to actually do those things would be really, really useful. Under shelter and sleeping, against a sleeping pad would be in some circles, some forums, they say it's an option. But I think most people would prefer to have one. Okay, so a sleeping pad. If you're not familiar, with the fact if you're out sleeping on the ground, if you ever see like homeless people, like they're almost always sleeping like on piles of newspaper or trash or cardboard or something like that because they know just from experience. But I mean, if you ever been backpacking, the ground sucks all the heat from you, so you need something that radiates heat back up to you. And so sleeping pads are super lightweight. You can get them at REI, you can get them on Amazon. They fold up. You can attach it to the outside of your pack. And in a situation where you had to sleep outside, like you would need to have that for sure. Even if you have a sleeping bag, usually a sleeping bag almost isn't enough if you don't have a sleeping pad because your heat is still going to some degree, come out of the sleeping bag and dissipate into the earth. Earth is just a heat sucker. Sleeping bag, quilt or a bivy. So again, like an emergency bivy or a sleeping bag that's super lightweight, or even like a really lightweight quilt. I do love the Army poncho liners. Those are super awesome. And then a sleeping mask and earplugs. Arnica would be happy to hear this because she loves her sleeping mask. So just from what I've read, there's some situations, emergency situations out there. You can be around a lot of people, a lot of chaos, a lot of sirens. Who knows what the situation would be? And earplugs and a sleeping mask, I think, could really come in handy. All right, so moving on, clothing, cold weather layers, meaning, again, we want long sleeve and long pants, like underwear layers, and then pants and long sleeve shirt for warmth and for sun protection. I'd say probably one long sleeve shirt, one pair of pants would be sufficient. And then a shell jacket and or a rain jacket. So a shell jacket is going to be something that is designed to go over some other clothing, but it's not super thick. It's not meant for super cold weather. And it does have some water resistance. It may not be waterproof, which is why you might want to have a really lightweight rain jacket to go along with it, or poncho or something like that. But definitely having a shell jacket in there, because even in the desert, when it gets in the evening, sometimes it can get really cold. If you got some wind or some bad weather, then it gets even worse. One or two pair of socks if you wear shoes, and then a bandana or neck gaiter. Like, they can serve a lot of different purposes. I have a bandana here. I have one in our bag at home. And I mean, again, you can use it for a face mask. You can use it for some kind of a head covering if you need to. You can use it for a tourniquet, for a splint. There's a lot of different uses for a bandana. A beanie, sun hat, gloves super useful, even if it's not cold. Again, sometimes it can get cold, even in the desert at night. But sometimes if you're having to chop some wood or carry some things, I think gloves come in handy. Even when we're out backpacking, sometimes it's useful to have gloves, just grabbing onto trees and stuff. All right, so that's clothing. And then if we look at light, again, here we see a headlamp. Headlamp, super useful. Have a separate one inside your bug out bag, and then maybe a lantern that's going to add a little bit of extra weight. I just got a backpacking lantern that I really like, and it's about this big, and it has a red light option on it. It's really cool, super lightweight, but that would be a bonus and upgrade. For communication, smartphone, which you're going to be carrying with you all the time, so it's not necessary to get a burner phone, but it might be useful. And then you also want to have a power bank. I think a power bank is super, super useful. NOAA radio, which is one of those emergency services radios. They got some really lightweight ones that are super solid, super sturdy, that have a hand crank on it. They also have an option to put like a USB cable into it that you can charge your phone, although I'm sure it would take forever because you're using that hand crank, but at least you could pick up on emergency messages, right? Now, a ham radio is this radio that requires a license, and I'm going to take the course. There's like several different levels for it. So actually, me and Fred are going to go through it and just kind of document our experience with it, and then we can share it with everybody else. So the ham radio is pretty badass because it can connect to other repeaters that can then pretty much go an infinite distance across the U.S. You're limited with CB radios and the handheld radios by distance and by terrain features and things like that. So having a ham radio might be really, really useful, but that would be an advanced thing. Having an NOAA emergency radio would be a base level. Signaling tape, whistle, mirror, no-brainers, super lightweight. For power, some of these things are a little bit redundant, but still, power bank, a wall plug and USB charging cable. I don't think most people would think about that. I think it'd be super useful, if you're out and about and you're trying to survive for 3 days, you come across a building that has some wall outlets, then that would come in handy, right? And then a portable solar charger would be an upgrade. So this is on my wish list. And they have some lightweight ones that kind of fold out, and they actually give you a pretty significant amount of power. And they have some that are very sturdy, very well tested. For navigation, compass and map with about 100 to 150 mile radius from your home. Driving distance from your home would be about 2 hours or something like that. And again, ideally that's topographical so that you can actually see terrain features. For tools, you're looking at knife and multi-tool, maybe about 50 feet of paracord, 550 cord. For medical and hygiene, first aid kit. Now, in your everyday carry, I think it's fine to have one of those kind of pre-made little 1-2 person med kits. It's got some Band-Aids and some other things. My sister's an EMT. She's also a firefighter. And I got a friend that's an ex-search and rescue. So we're trying to put together this list of how to make a homemade med kit that is super useful and practical, but only has the things that you actually need. So when we end up putting that together, I'm imagining that I'll have to buy those individual supply pieces, not in bulk, but like not in single pieces, right? So I'll probably put in the group, if anyone else wants to build a kit based on this little template that we put together, when I order these things, however I have enough of, I'll make extras and sell it at cost or something like that. So a mask, super useful. Everybody know what a mask is after these freaking years? Some of these guys actually recommend having some kind of a gas mask, in case you have like some kind of a biohazard situation. I think that would be an ultimate upgrade, but definitely having a mask, toilet paper, a little camping backpacking shovel would be useful. There's some super lightweight ones. I have one that's called a Deuce, and it's a fitting name, but like it's very lightweight, and so that you can bury poop if you need to. Some soap, so either a little container of some liquid soap, or maybe like a quarter or half a bar of soap or something like that. Nail clippers. Goggles, super useful, especially in windy situations. If you got some kind of a biohazard or slightly biohazard, or you got like a lot of people and there's some kind of a sickness going around. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but during COVID, like we found out, I didn't know this before COVID, a lot of viruses get into our body through our eyes. So having some goggles, having a mask would be really useful. I think wet wipes would be really useful too. From a mental and emotional standpoint, making sure that you have maybe your religious book in there, like a Bible or something like that, if that's important to you, a waterproof deck of cards, some dice, and maybe some indulgences. It was funny because a lot of these guys even said carry around some cigarettes, because you can usually barter with some people that are like addicted to smoking. But like if you have some indulgences, I'm probably going to have some cigars in my bag. What else was I thinking along those lines? Oh, indulgences maybe for us would be some freeze-dried coffee. So, and then documents, again, no brainer, a little notepad and pen. You can get some waterproof notepads on Amazon, at REI, some of these outdoor stores. They used to call them Ranger pads that don't smear and tear up once they get a little bit damp. And then a USB and photocopy of critical documents. This would be another place that you want to have those things. Maybe $100 cash up to $1,000 cash. And then for self-defense, handgun, extra magazine, maybe some pepper spray. And then miscellaneous would be some things like some Ziploc bags. If you're using some bags to compartmentalize these different categories, then those bags may come in handy, but maybe having some extra Ziploc bags. Some trash bags are super lightweight. Everyone agrees that they can be super useful for a lot of reasons. You can use it for, some shelter. You can use it as a poncho if you need to. Maybe having just one waterproof bag. So we have one waterproof bag, or I have one waterproof bag in my bug out bag. It's one of those that you can fold up in it. And that also can act as some buoyancy, it can have some air in it, but it's completely watertight. You can put like a lot of your electronics and stuff in it. And then duct tape and Ranger bands. Ranger bands are those really thick rubber bands that have a lot of different purposes. You can bind all kinds of different things together with it. You can even start fires with Ranger bands. This is really cool. And then duct tape, very, very versatile. Okay. So again, I think looking at that from a category perspective is useful. Okay. So what we probably want to do is like chip away at putting this thing together. Okay. When we look at the categories, it's like, okay, I can simplify this to a degree that's like, okay, these are the things that I feel like I would understand. I need these things to get through a few days. And then we have the handout that goes through some more specifics. If it's helpful, I can go in here and say priority and then secondary upgrade or something like that. I was thinking about doing that. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that or not. If we had to kind of maybe recommend a path to working on these different things here, number one priority is emergency communication plan, critical documents, and then 14 days of home self-reliance. All right. Meaning that you can shelter in place and take care of yourself and not be dependent upon anything or anyone else for 14 days. After you've got those things in place, then you're working on your bags. I think the WTFU is super easy. You can do it in half a day unless you have to get some documents that you don't have. But the majority of it you can put together pretty fast. I think personally, everyday carry would be the second most useful thing to put together, and then working on your bug out bag. And then maybe you're working on the bug out bag in the background as you're doing these other things. I think get home bag is kind of a bonus.